All right, YouTube. Bernie Sanders has been eliminated from the Democratic nomination process. We all know Hillary Clinton will be the nominee. I think it's regrettable for the Democratic Party, even if I, don't think Sanders has a clue what he's doing economically. That is sort of the direction the Democratic Party is going to be increasingly led in. It's quite clear. The under 30 demographic that considers itself left largely supported Sanders. A lot of them are not going to support Hillary. And so what you've got is a situation where now some millions of people supposedly are going to show up in Philadelphia at their convention to protest, Occupy the DNC sort of movement. I think that the millions of protesters figure is really pie in the sky. I think it'll be under 100,000, but some tens of thousands certainly. Not only would it not be surprising if that many people show up, I'd be surprised if they didn't. Honestly, I'd be surprised if 20 or 30,000 at least didn't show up to protest at the DNC, and it's going to be wild. It's going to be an enormous number of protesters either way. Even a few thousand would make the news. A few tens of thousands will just lend an air of dissent, an air of Clinton's not really a Democratic candidate in the sense of actually believing in what a large proportion of the Democratic base feels should be the Democratic platform as a candidate. Essentially what it means is a large number of people will begin to reject her. Here's another reason, by the way, why I think people overestimate Hillary Clinton's strength. It's fairly clear that a large proportion of those currently backing her against Trump and Johnson and so forth are not going to continue to after the convention. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a significant amount of dissent both within the convention as well as outside among the protesters. Now, does it matter what the size of the crowd protesting is? Yes, to an extent. If 10 people show up, obviously it's going to be seen as a joke. But do not underestimate the tenacity of Sanders supporters. Now, this is Philadelphia. You could probably scrape together at least a few tens of thousands of people in the Philly metro area to go and protest Hillary Clinton. Add to this the fact that a lot of people that have already jumped ship to third-party candidates may show up, and probably should. If Gary Johnson is smart, if he's smart and if his supporters are smart, not that I've continued to back him, but if he's smart, if his supporters truly want to see him take off and become viable, they will go to the protests. They will hand out literature saying, hey, you think that Hillary's not on board enough with marijuana? You think she's too much of a warmonger? She took too many corporate donations? Here's your guy. Here are all the platforms we agree upon. The fact that Gary Johnson is more pro-gun obviously isn't going to bother the Sanders fans. Sanders already came out at the first debate and said he's not really on board with the harder rhetoric on the gun issue. My goodness, Johnson could absorb several million Sanders fans with relative ease, really bump his numbers up and become viable. He'd certainly be in the presidential debates at that point. If he can manage to do that, then it would be a real thorn in the side of both the Trump and Clinton campaigns. Because the Republican, here's the one thing, Trump is a maverick who's waging a new style of campaign that really has put the other Republicans and a lot of the Democrats on edge, because it's clear their tactics can't really deal with it. But neither Trump nor Hillary, I think, ever envisioned a three-way race in which there wouldn't just be one other competitor to focus on. Gary Johnson, meanwhile, is waging basically the first viable libertarian campaign. Now, I may not think that some of the ideas that he's taken up are quite appropriate for the Libertarian Party. I found out, by the way, it's total propaganda that he supported the TPP. His stated position is that he opposes it. It's Hillary that supports the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He's not on board with the NSA. The Next News Network was trying to say, oh, now he supports snitching and domestic surveillance. I haven't seen any proper source for this, and in fact, his stated position is totally different. And I never had a problem with Johnson on any of those issues. My major problem with his platform is entirely based on the idea of borders. Calling Trump racist for suggesting that there should be a pause in immigration, I think, is a low blow. I think it's unbecoming a libertarian to use such an emotionally loaded term, a dishonestly used term most of the time. It really just plays into it's really just out of the playbook of somebody like Hillary or Obama. But that being said, you might get a situation where you've got Sanders fans are protesting. You've got a bunch of libertarians potentially showing up to take advantage of the fact that these people will not back Hillary Clinton. And I mean a substantial, probably double-digit proportion of partisan Democrats will abandon the Democratic Party. It's been a trickle up until now. Some of them fed into Trump's fan support in the open primaries there, helped him get nominated. Some of them fed into the Johnson campaign. I'm sure some of them jumped to Jill Stein. I think the Green Party averaged out at about like 1.5% in most states in the last election. Stein is now arguably at 3 or 4%. That's not bad for a third-party candidate. Jill Stein, the sort of fourth-wheel candidate, has a higher polling average than the Libertarian Party, which was the only kind of viable third-party contender the last time around. Meanwhile, Gary Johnson is arguably above 10% already. In a campaign where neither the Republican nor the Democratic nominee is really liked by their own party, in which you have a large proportion of even the partisan fan bases of both parties abandoning ship. Where are they going to go? I think the third parties are going to rise. I think that it will still end up being President Trump or President Clinton. I think the former is still more likely. I don't care what the polling's saying right now. I've got my own reasons for analyzing it that way. Doesn't really matter. I still expect that it will be a mainstream political party holding power, but third parties, for the first time in a very long time, will have prominence. I think that's, by the way, healthy. It doesn't even matter what the third party is espousing as a platform, just to get it in people's heads that there are more viewpoints that you can have than just one or the other of two really bland, boring, similar parties that for decades now have been converging. People always talk about political divergence. The parties are growing apart. That's why we have a partisan climate. No, we have a hyper-partisan climate because the two parties are so similar that they have to take the handful of things that not all their members completely agree upon, like we need to send more money abroad, we need to bail out businesses and banks, we need to make sure not to get rid of Citizens United, we sure as hell need to keep the wars and the drug wars going, and by the way, we need more surveillance, we need more money for that too. Both of them agree upon all of these actual important issues. On something really minute, like should we allow people to grow this genetically modified red grass? Should we allow people to eat crab legs on Sunday? Something like that. They'll pretend that it's some great moral crusade and pretend that they diverge on the issue at all. Most of the time, they don't give a fuck. They just make up some fucking pretend idea and everybody's just acting stupid in DC constantly. It doesn't matter if a third party wins. It matters that they reach a high enough threshold, a high enough proportion of the population, so that the next time around, even millions of more people will actually realize that, yeah, there are other parties, there are other ideologies. Maybe you should fucking open the Wikipedia article on them or something. At least something very cursory, very basic and rudimentary. You can at least be bothered to take 15 minutes out of your fucking day to do that. A lot of people up until now, they thought literally there were only two parties in the United States. I believe that until Ron Paul showed up, started talking about libertarianism. What's that, I said. What's libertarianism? Heard him speak. Looked up some of the elements of libertarianism. Realized there was a libertarian party. I said, oh, that's pretty good. That sounds a lot better than the shit that's going on to me. And now, of course, many tens of millions of other people understand that too. If Johnson is actually polling at 5 to 10%, he's already got like 10, 20 million people supporting him. That's a pretty damn good fan base for somebody who's a member of a party that up until now never polled higher than 4% in any given state. I think the highest was like New Hampshire. I think it was like 3.5%. I think they got like 3% in Texas. This is 2012. Now I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit the double digits in many of these places, the more libertarian-friendly parts of the country. That's all you need. That's all you need for the Libertarian Party to branch out, form stronger local and state level orders as well, and start taking chunks out of the state governments away from the two authoritarian parties that we've got. I still fully support the libertarian movement. I simply think that Gary Johnson is not the best, most appropriate standard bearer for the party, given the issues that are prevailing right now, given what we're currently going through. But Bernie Sanders fans right now are instrumental in the entire campaign. Because on the Republican side, the established order already got overthrown. The nominee is a person who isn't even well-liked by a lot of members of his own party. a lot of the pundits that sort of lean right, a lot of the old guard Republicans, the McCains and so forth, they're kind of on board but critical of Trump, or they're not on board, or they're ambivalent. They just don't say anything because they're too fucking afraid to for their political futures. But on the Democratic side, the outsiders did not quite prevail. Bernie Sanders, while waging probably the best rogue campaign other than Trump's that we've seen in living memory, did not manage to supplant the Clinton machine. Now, we've got leaked DNC documents from Guccifer 2.0, a Russian hacker, saying, oh yeah, the DNC, here's the DNC rigging it all along. Here's a bunch of corporate donors to Clinton, to the DNC, all the shit that they're saying. A lot of these people, they're big corporate and bank figures. These are the sort of sleazeballs that bankroll people like Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush on the other side. And guess what? It doesn't matter what party they're a member of. They don't care what political party they belong to. All they care about is that they can control them. That's the element of what's happening in the political campaign. For the first time, people have really woken up to the fact that, number one, things aren't working the way they're going. The establishment is on its way out. Things are not working. The Republicans can pretend if we only had a Republican in the White House, things would be better. The Democrats can do the same. Oh, if only we elect another Democrat, things will be fine. And yet under W and Obama, people from different parties, things continuously have worsened. The only thing that was good about the 90s is that I was too dumb to realize things could get worse. Things could get more corrupt, more out of touch, more screwy. And so Hillary Clinton represents the inside corporate banker, globalist-friendly TPP, fucking moral wedge issue using corrupt core of the Democratic Party. And you have tens of millions of people, many of which are partisan Democrats, a lot of which are left-leaning independents or first-time voters, and especially younger voters who lean so heavily left. They're not going to support her. These people will... I have a feeling that after the convention, when Hillary is actually officially nominated, her popularity will crash. Why do I think this? I think that a lot of Sanders fans, not wanting truly to believe that Sanders is out, they realize he's not in the national polling. So if they're told, oh, who do you prefer, Hillary or Trump? They're going to say Hillary. She's the Democrat, sort of stand in for Sanders at this point. They're still hoping he can eke out a win at the convention, that if enough of them show up and protest loud enough, that if Sanders gets up and delivers a really good speech, that if something inexplicable happens, the fact that he hasn't yet conceded and he's going all the way is just helping to reinforce their belief. They still think he can pull it off. I'm here to tell you he can't. The DNC is completely, utterly corrupt. We have leaked files from the DNC itself showing a clear rigging going back almost a decade to get Hillary Clinton in as the next president of the United States. The fix has been in for longer than most of these people have even been able to vote. And yet they still hold out hope that somehow this rogue socialist is going to be able to usurp that. I'm sorry, there's not enough money in your pockets collectively if you gave up every red cent to Sanders' lingering campaign to get him into that position. He's not going to woo 500-600 superdelegates to his side. He's not going to convince the DNC to alter the rules to let him get in on a second vote. You're not going to be able to force the Clintonian DNC to recognize the fact that Clinton probably can't win the general election because she's seen as too unpopular, too dishonest, and she's by no means as dynamic as Trump. He'll outmaneuver her. It doesn't matter if he has to come from behind. He'll outmaneuver him at every step. You're essentially, by nominating Clinton, you're going to get Trump. That's my argument. Now, I don't really give a fuck. Even if I'm only on board with Trump because the libertarian nominee is acting a little bit ineffectual like a screwball, I still wish Johnson well, by the way. I think Trump's preferable to Clinton, not by an enormous margin. I don't have a problem with the wall. I don't have a problem with racial profiling. I think some of his beliefs are outright screwy. I think Clinton's are a lot screwier. But those Sanders fans, if they show up by the hundreds of thousands, then it's essentially over for Hillary. Her popularity will drop like a rock. If they show up in the tens of thousands, which is more likely, it's still going to take a bite out of her support. It's still going to weaken the DNC. Debbie Wasserman Schultz just got canned by Hillary. And look at that. ran her last campaign, which failed, of course, which might be one reason Hillary doesn't like her so much. Ran Hillary's 2008 bid, has been head of the DNC, has pulled out all the stops to do everything Clinton wanted her to do, and what happens? She gets sacked as the head of the DNC by the Clintons. It's really, this is how they treat their allies. How do you think they'll treat the American people? So no, I hope that Clinton comes in fourth place. I hope that all these Sanders fans, they back like Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, or swing over to... It doesn't matter who you support as long as it's not Clinton. There are 3 other people in the running that are technically viable, 2 of which are now truly viable. Trump's viable, mainstream candidate. Gary Johnson, if he's actually at 10%, he's viable. He's a viable candidate. It's a long shot, but you can vote for him if you want to. The only way you can waste your vote is to vote for Clinton, who has basically defrauded her own party. She defrauded tens of millions of Democratic partisans, pretending to be something she's not. Now we find out, oh, yeah, back in 2009, the fix was already in. We all knew that she would be coronated by the Democratic Party. It was obvious to most of us all along that there was about a 99% chance she was going to win, even before the first debate happened. What did a lot of us say? Hillary Clinton is virtually inevitable. It would take the amount of effort required to unseat her would be enormous. So I hope that 100,000 Sanders fans do show up in Philly. I hope it is 8 million people. I don't expect it to be. Nothing would please me more than to see several million people, mostly young, let's face it, show up and start protesting the DNC. It would be anarchy. It would be the biggest political thrust in American history. It would be absolute, utter mayhem. It would probably cause the DNC to shut down its own convention. And at that point, maybe they would realize the error of their ways. But you're going to have a lot of fucking work to get 1 million people to show up for anything like that. If you can do it, if you Sanders fans can do it, you'll have plenty of respect in my book. I can't respect Sanders' tax plan or his idea that socialism is a good thing. But if he can fuck up the DNC that hard as revenge for being shafted, which, let's face it, I mean, the votes were rigged against him the entire time. The polling was probably rigged. The voting was probably rigged. The DNC's rules, the debate schedule, those were certainly rigged. There's no argument about that. The fundraising was rigged against him. Everything was rigged against him. They wanted to coronate second place Madam Hillary from the last time around, who just happens to be kind of sort of an ally of Obama. Not friendly towards him. She hates his guts. She probably calls him racial slurs behind his back because we know the Clintons are very racist as well. Real racists, you know, not I think we should profile members of a certain religion because it's violent racist. I mean, like, actually get back in the fucking fields Obama sort of racist. I wouldn't be surprised if Clinton talks like that behind closed doors. We've got it on good authority that she does call black people certain names. She also calls gay people and retarded children certain names too, so... She uses the term retard unironically. I use it to describe morons, like Hillary. She uses it to describe the mentally handicapped, apparently. She's a fucking shill. She is the worst thing to happen to the Democratic Party in a long fucking time. You have to go back to when the Democrats were the party of the Klan to find people that were as vile as Hillary Clinton. And even then it'd be a stretch. Hillary Clinton combines all of the economic chops of Jimmy Carter with the campaign strategy of Walter Mondale and throws in LBJ's good temperament. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's completely fucktarded any way that you look at it. That's about all. Peace out.